Blacks in Technology.
Blacks in technology. Blacks in technology. Blacks in technology. Blacks in technology. Blacks in technology.
Welcome, everybody, to the Blacks in Technology audio podcast. This is episode 6. I'm here with Ronnie Hash, and I'm Greg Greenlee. And today on our show, we have Arielle Scott. And we're going to talk with her about some of her initiatives, some of the things that she's doing. So we want to go ahead and welcome Arielle Scott to the show.
How's it going?
Great.
How are you?
Well. Doing pretty well. So let's start off with a little background information on, I guess, like where you're from, what college you went to, things like that.
Sure. So again, my name's Arielle. I grew up in the Bay Area in a small town called Vallejo, California, very close to San Francisco and that kind of area. I went to college at the University of California, Berkeley or Cal, some like to call it. And there I studied information technology and media. So I had to create my own major in order to do that. And so really a lot of my studies were around studying the business or the marketing or the media behind technology startups or just IT in general.
Okay. I think we exchanged some emails earlier, and I took a look at some of the things you've been doing. You're pretty busy. I was looking at your LinkedIn site, and I've seen like a ton of information on here. I'm like, you've done more than a lot of people have done in their entire lives. So like you've been a part of a couple of startups. Right now you run Gin Juice. And what else have you done? You've done a lot. It's like a book. I can read this whole thing, and it'll take me like 4 days to read it.
I mean, I like that. I kind of like that.
Go ahead, Ronnie.
I kind of like that. I kind of like that name, Gin Juice. How did that come about?
That is the classic question. I get that question at least once a day. So I want to come up with a really good story behind it. Like, I want to say, I was hanging out with, Snoop one day, and then he just turned to me and said, you know what, Gin Juice. And I was like, yes, I'm going to do it. But that never happened. Really, Gin Juice stands for Generation Juice. So a lot of the projects or companies that I've started have all been around young people and creating technology or creating products or creating services that in some way solve kind of the issues or problems that young people would experience. So when I was working on Gin Juice, before that, I actually started a company called Internship In, which connected startups with interns. Because as a student, it was really difficult for me to find startup internships, and I wanted to solve that problem. So early this year, when I was working on Gin Juice, I was writing kind of the precursor to my thesis, and the thesis was going to be about young entrepreneurs and just kind of how in this day and age, young people really have to cultivate an entrepreneurial kind of way of doing things if they want to be competitive, even for going to get a job. So you need to start a blog. You need to, you really need to learn how to market yourself and take on those entrepreneurial kind of ways of promoting yourself in order for you to be competitive in this world. So that was going to be my thesis. And in order to do that, I was putting together these meetups for young entrepreneurs. The meetup started to take off, and then I wanted to create something around them. So that's kind of how Gin Juice or Generation Juice kind of came about. But yeah, the name, I have no fun story. I need to come up with like a better story on why I named that.
No, that was
pretty good.
Yeah, I like that.
Let me ask you about Internship In. You kind of already answered one of my questions, which was the idea behind internship. But what did you learn on the business side of it that you didn't know before going into it, and what did you learn on the technology side? Because I was reading about it, and I think you had something on your site. You were saying about like some of your inspirations, and one of them was one of your friends, Jessica Ma.
Yeah.
And she does a lot. I guess she's a computer science major, or she was a computer science major, so she did a lot with the technology side. So I'm pretty sure that you probably learned quite a bit from her. So what can you tell us about some of the things that you learned on both ends?
Yeah, no, and that's a really good question. So Internship In was my first ever tech startup, or just introduction to tech in general.
Okay.
I knew nothing about how to run a company, and I knew nothing about how to build a product. So with Internship In, really what happened was I came up with the idea, and I kept going to Jessica and kept mocking things up to the best of my ability and saying, hey, I really want to do this. I'm going to do this. Like, I really need your help. And so what I learned from after Jessica and Andy we all came together and decided to work on it, the first thing that I learned was, from a business perspective, I learned that partnerships are number one when it comes to trying to do something and being the first to do it. My role within Internship In became doing a lot of the business development and all that stuff, and I just scoured over reaching out to as many people as possible, and just not getting too discouraged when I got turned down or people just didn't know who I was and didn't care about what I was working on. So I guess from a business perspective, the number one thing I grabbed from Internship In was the huge importance of kind of building a community around what you're doing and doing that through partnerships and business development. From a technology perspective, I knew nothing about tech going in to work on Internship In, so I literally learned everything as we were going along. I think one of the biggest things, if I had to prioritize, was I learned about how to work in iterations, and just kind of how to work efficiently in terms of building a product that has the kinds of features that are just building a product that needs the bare minimum of features. So a good example is with Internship In, every day I had a new idea on what could happen, or a new feature that we could add to the product to make it that much better. And then by the end of Internship In, after just chatting with Jess and Andy, I realized that focusing on just one or two key features as a startup and as an early stage product is the smartest thing that anyone could ever do. And I think that it's kind of counterintuitive for people who are working on the business side, because they always think, if you add more, it's going to make it more and more valuable. But it incrementally takes away from the value of the product. So with Gin Juice, when we were building the product and we were coming up with ideas for products underneath Gin Juice, I stressed to the team daily or hourly that we need to just focus on one or two core problems and kind of following the customer development model, following lean startup principles and whatnot, of focusing on one or two key features and then iterating on top of that as you grow. So not going all in all at once. I'd say that those are the two big things that I learned from a business perspective: building a community around what you're building, or building a community around your startups or products. And then from a technical perspective, focus on one or two key problems that your customers experience, and then build features around that. And as you grow, scale into different iterations.
Yeah, that is some real good advice there. Now, question: have you always had a taste for entrepreneurship, or did that just come along because you came across that issue where you couldn't find a gig, so that gave you the desire to start something to not only help yourself but help others? And I found that when you have the desire to help other people, you become more successful because you follow that passion as well. So have you always had that entrepreneurship desire?
No, not at all. In fact, if I was to meet with my 13-year-old self today, she'd be like, "What are you doing? I never would have thought that you'd do this." I came into Cal thinking I would go into physics, and then from there, I kind of decided I was more interested in architecture. I studied abroad, and I was studying favelas in Brazil, and I came back, and when I came back, I was interested in. The first thing that I ever did that was entrepreneurial was I was working with friends who were fashion designers, and I was helping them market their different designs to get new clients and to get into retail stores and all that stuff. It was just something that I was doing to help those friends. And then I decided I can create a company around it, and I can do something, a little more stronger around it. And then that was my introduction to marketing, and that was my introduction to business. And once I started kind of, just helping people with marketing, then I started to think about, as I mentioned earlier, all of the problems that I personally had that I knew other people had that I could go and solve. And ever since then, I think I've always kind of thought of solutions as in the form of businesses. So whenever I have a problem now, I'm like, it's a blessing and a curse. Whenever I have a problem, I always think of a startup or a technology or some kind of product that can solve that problem. But it was never a way that I went about thinking or living until I was introduced to business or marketing and tech.
That's pretty interesting because I'm starting to realize that that's how a lot of good businesses get started, because it's kind of more of a thing of necessity than it is, I just got this great idea. Like case in point, I was watching an interview on Jay-Z, and they were asking him questions about how he came up with, with the 40/40 club, and oh my God, he must be this great, brilliant, business guy. He was like, nah, we just need a place to chill. I was like, oh, that seems like, kind of what the trend seems to be. Even with Blacks in Technology, it was more of a thing like we need a place to talk tech. We need a place that represents us in technology, and it was kind of a thing more born out of necessity than it was like some brilliant brainstorming idea. So yeah, I could definitely relate to that.
Absolutely, and even to add to that, I realized that when every time that because I have ideas for products and startups all the time, every time that I think to build a business just because I want to be entrepreneurial and I want to start something, those ideas tend to fail. I tend to not be able to recruit a really good team. I tend to not be able to be as passionate about it. But every time I don't really think about, for a really good example is Gin Juice was never supposed to be a business. I really only wanted to just kind of go about building a community of young entrepreneurs and just help them. It was only after I saw the traction and just like all of the excitement and enthusiasm that I was like, oh, there's something here. There's a bite-sized nugget of just value that maybe we could explode in some way. But I think, yeah, anytime that I've always thought about, I want to start a business, I want to be, I want to be the next Mark Zuckerberg, or I want to do this, and it's not about the people. It's more about, my own dreams of success or whatever. That's when what I'm working on tends to fail.
Gotcha. I wanted to ask you, I was, going through some of your background information and was reading Jessica's blog, and I wanted to ask you a question about something that she blogged about and get your perspective on it. She said this was, I think it was, she was blogging about, I think she got funding for her the business that she's developed, the Indinero.
Yeah.
And she said, getting the funding is not like, the most exciting thing or anything like that. But it was a quote that she said. She said, it's like what a good Asian parent would say, just because you got A's in school doesn't mean you'll actually succeed in life. I guess what she was referring to was the fact that everybody was making the fact that she, got this VC funding a big deal, and she was just making it like, oh, it's not really a big deal. It doesn't mean anything. And so she said that, and I was thinking like, oh, what exactly do you think? Because you had a pretty good GPA in school, but tell me what you feel is the key to being successful.
That's an awesome question, and I don't even know where to start. So a few things on the funding, and I mean, I spent a lot of time with Jess, and I was on the Indinero team in the early stages. I think in many ways I agree with Jess in the sense that, like, there are so many entrepreneurs, and I met them during the Gin Juice tour, who think of funding as an end goal, who think of, like being able to raise a lot of money from from investors who are excited about your idea as the end all be all, and you're finally successful. I don't think that being able to raise funding means that you're successful. In fact, sometimes I think if you raise funding, it may go against your success as a company and as an entrepreneur. I say that from an entrepreneurial perspective, success is your ability to build a product that people will fight, kick, scream, and really go out of their way to get and to talk about. And I think that if you can do that and have those people come again and again to buy your product, then that means that you are a successful entrepreneur. It's not your ability to convince investors to put money into your company. It's not your ability to convince people to join your team. It's all about your ability to sell a product that really, really gets to the solve the problem for the everyday public and just society in general. So that's how I look at success from an entrepreneurial perspective, and that's the way that I live my life. If I want to start a product or I want to build a company that people really, really care about and that it actually solves a problem and it changes kind of the way that we live today. That's how I define success entrepreneurially. We need a much simpler word.
It's a tongue twister, isn't it?
Entrepreneur. There should be a different word for that. So going back also to the grades thing, the way I grew up, I never really had someone work with me on homework and all that stuff. The only reason why I did well in school is because I'm really, really competitive, and I saw that my friends were getting better grades, so I always fought to do better than they did. It had nothing to do with really learning the material. I just really wanted to get better grades than everybody else.
Okay.
I don't really value grades in terms of, and this sounds really bad. Like, I value school, I value education, but I don't value, grades and kind of fighting to get an A on your paper, because anyone can really do that. I'd say that I'd apply the same principle as an entrepreneur to a person who's just living their everyday life. If you get up in the morning and you know that you're solving a true need that real people experience, then you're successful, in my opinion.
Yeah. To go into that, being an entrepreneur, do you ever see yourself being satisfied with a regular 9-to-5 job? And also kind of give us a little insight into your entrepreneurship. How's your day on a daily basis? What is it that you do?
Yeah. So that's a really, really good question, because if you asked me that about 3 weeks ago, I would say absolutely not. You can never work for someone else's company and be an entrepreneur. That just can't happen. But recently I actually have been. I took on. I work for a company in Alameda, and I'm helping them with business development. And it was so. I'll give you guys some real insight. With Gin Juice, we were having difficulty coming up with a revenue model. It was really difficult. Everyone was maxing out their credit cards left and right. It was getting really intense, and so we all decided we would get part-time jobs. And that's what I went and did. And as I came into a company, bright-eyed entrepreneur, my only background has been in entrepreneurship. I came into this company and I realized that there are a lot of things that could be learned. This is so funny that I'm hearing myself say this, but there are a lot of things that can be learned from actual large, established, structured companies. I think that they've worked through a lot of the hard problems that entrepreneurs, we kick ourselves after we realize, something, and I think I mentioned this in the Black Web 2.0 interview, but something as simple as a status document or just little structural things that make lives so much easier have already been a part of large companies that entrepreneurs, if they've never been in that environment, would never know about. So I think there's a lot of value to be said for working at a 9-to-5. As well as working at a startup. I think you should have a mixed bag. Now, with what I will say to that is there's a difference between an entrepreneur because you started a company and you're working on your own company, and an entrepreneurial kind of mindset. I think that the way that I do things, wherever I am, whether it be in school, at work, on my own startups, for other people's startups, etc., I always think about the end result, and I always think about the impact it will have on whoever our potential client, potential customer is. And I think that that's a very entrepreneurial way of doing things, where you say, okay, this is great, but how does my work relate to the end result, the end goal of this business? And I think if for anyone who's working at a 9 to 5, they should always think about, what is my contribution to this large company, and how can I contribute to us getting to that end customer, that end client, and where do I fit within the grand scheme of this entity, of this institution? If you just go to your job and you just grind away and then you go home and that's it, and you don't really think about like what you're actually contributing, I don't think that you are cultivating the entrepreneurial spirit that actually is innate to you. I think everyone kind of has that ability to think like that and to work like that. It's just some people are conditioned to do it and some aren't.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Because I've noticed a lot of people just coming up in IT. You get those people who just kind of take their jobs as their jobs, and that's it. And some people who are more passionate in what they do, they look at it as enhancing themselves as well as enhancing, the company that they work for. So yeah, I definitely agree with that. Let me ask you. Let me backtrack just a little bit. You were talking about that you came up, or I guess you came up with your own major, the information technology and media. How did that happen?
Well, I love my school. Berkeley is great.
Okay.
So like I said earlier, I came into Berkeley thinking that I wanted to be a physicist. I changed my mind after the first couple classes, and I just wasn't interested anymore. And then I started to just get interested in so many different things. And it was frustrating because I just couldn't find myself kind of reducing myself to just one major. I mean, I wasn't going to double major just because there was just too much that I was more interested in like 4 or 5 different things opposed to 1 or 2. So then there's this cool thing at Berkeley. I feel like this is one big Berkeley commercial, where you can actually say, I'm going to study this specific thing, and I'm just going to take classes again amongst all of the different disciplines I'm interested in. So I came in. It's called interdisciplinary study. So it's basically where you blend a bunch of majors together and you make one unique major. And so the major that I made was information technology and media. And so I've taken a lot of classes in like industrial engineering and business administration and mass comm and different places, sociology. I just kind of taken a lot of different courses, but they've all been around IT. And they've all been around just kind of like studying, whether it be actually studying technology itself and like studying like, different, I took like my early to intro computer science class and all that stuff. Whether it's that or it's also studying like, the sociology or the more human side of technology, which is what I've always been kind of interested in as a business person who operates within the space.
Okay, awesome. I have a question. Greg and I, we talk a bit about African Americans starting companies and stuff like that. With Gen Juice, how many African Americans, or have you seen young African Americans trying to start their own thing? Have you seen many?
No, I would have to say. So it varies on like because we did the tour, and when we toured we went to 13 different cities, and in each city you had I think we had a group of people that was kind of like reflective of the area that we went to. But even that said, there weren't a lot. Like I've been in tech now for like, I don't know, 3.5 years or something like that. I've never really seen too many African Americans in either side, either it be in the IT and actual like development of technology and products, or on the business side. My co-founder Danielle Leslie is African American, and so I think we naturally kind of graduated. I met her while I was at Berkeley, and immediately we just kind of had that connection. I don't know if it was based solely on race, but it definitely was. Like, we both understood each other because we didn't see too many of ourselves out there.
Gotcha. Well, was that more of a West Coast swing, the 13 city tour? Or
we made a complete U-turn around the country. So we went to we did Seattle, Chicago, New York, Boston, Austin, Phoenix, Atlanta. There's some I'm forgetting, and I feel really bad. LA. So we did most of those. DC. Yep. And I mean, and each one. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Do you have any plans on doing any more tours, or is that kind of it?
It's still in the works. We're still thinking about. At the moment, we're making Gin Juice into really. We're going to focus on content because originally we wanted to do more tours, and we wanted to do a huge conference also where it was focusing on like Gen Y entrepreneurship. But as we all started to think a little bit about what I was saying earlier, first iteration, we wanted to keep it pretty simple and just create content for the people that we met during the tour and people who are starting companies.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Now, speaking of content, tell me why brainstorming is dead.
You guys really have some good questions today. This is awesome. Why is brainstorming dead?
Yeah.
Oh, man. Okay. So so with brainstorming, I think the act of sitting down and hoping that ideas come to you, I think that concept is dead because it shouldn't have existed in the first place. Why would sitting amongst other people in an empty room and just kind of hoping that things will hit you and fall on your head, I don't even know why that even came about. I say the act of going out and actually experiencing, if that makes sense, and actually putting yourself in. I mean, if you're trying to solve like a problem and you're brainstorming to solve that problem, don't sit in an empty room with blank walls and try and come up with a solution. Go out to where the problem is experienced and watch and take notes and talk to people and learn about more of the problem, and then you'll have a better solution. And I mean, focus groups are great. Some people do that when they're doing like research, and hopefully I'm not going in a completely different direction.
No.
But I'd say the way that I like to do things is if I'm building a form of technology, if I'm working on a startup, if I'm working on a campaign, I like to put myself right in the line of fire, right where the people that I'm interested, where my audience will be, and go and live with them and experience them. And that's part of the reason why we did the tour. I think that's so much more effective than brainstorming, quote unquote.
Gotcha. When I read that on your site, I stopped brainstorming that day. I was actually brainstorming before I actually read that. I was like, oh, it's dead. I didn't know that. I'll stop now.
That's so awesome. Yeah, no, I mean, I hope that, and a lot of people, I like to make those huge claims all the time, but I really do think that there are so many little things that people get caught up on, like, we have to solve this problem, so let's have like a 2-hour-long meeting where we go through it instead of living through the problem. I mean, I think that's definitely like what sparked my thoughts on that.
Blacks in technology. Blacks in technology. Blacks in technology. Blacks in technology. Blacks in technology.